Thank you. Where did the little stool thing go? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I want to be like Trump. Huge.
Mr. Trump, you've called for a deportation force to remove the 11 million undocumented immigrants from the United States. You've also promised to let what you call the good ones come back in, your words, the good ones, after they've been deported. Senator Cruz would not allow them to come back in. He says that's the biggest difference between the two of you. He calls your plan amnesty. Is it?
First of all, he was in charge of amnesty. He was the leader, and you can ask Marco because they've been debating this every debate that we've had. As far as coming back in, number one, you wouldn't even be talking, and you wouldn't have asked that as the first question if it weren't for me when I talked about illegal immigration. It wouldn't even be a big subject. But we either have a country or we don't have a country. We have at least 11 million people in this country that came in illegally. They will go out. They will come back. Some will come back, the best, through a process. They have to come back legally. They have to come back through a process, and it may not be a very quick process, but I think that's very fair and very fine. They're going to get online with other people. The best of them will come back, but they're going to come back through a process.
But the numbers just don't add up from what Senator Sanders has been proposing. That's why all of the independent experts, all of the editorial boards that have vetted both of us have concluded that it is just not achievable. Let's go down a path where we can actually tell people what we will do. A progressive is someone who makes progress. That's what I intend to do.
Thank you, Secretary. Senator Sanders, so just explain how you've spent nearly 2 decades in Congress and haven't gotten any of these things passed. Why do you think, as president, you'll be able to achieve big new programs like this?
Well, I haven't quite run for president before. Let's deal with some of the comments that Secretary Clinton made. And by the way, sometimes there's a lot of drama here. I've known Secretary Clinton for 25 years and respect her very much. Here is the issue. Every major country on earth, whether it's the UK, whether it's France, whether it's Canada, has managed to provide health care to all people as a right, and they are spending significantly less per capita on health care than we are. So I do not accept the belief that the United States of America can't do that. I do not accept the belief that the United States of America and our government can't stand up to the rip-offs of the pharmaceutical industry, which charge us by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Number two, in the economy today, everybody understands that we need a well-educated workforce. This is 2016. When we talk about public education, it can no longer be K through 12th grade. I do believe that public colleges and universities should be tuition-free. Well, how do we pay for that? It's an expensive proposition. I do believe that we substantially lower student debt in this country, which is crushing millions of people. We pay for it, in my view, by a tax on Wall Street speculation. The middle class bailed out Wall Street in their time of need. Now it is Wall Street's time to help the middle class.
If I could just follow up on that. 30 seconds. There is no disagreement between us on universal coverage for health care. The disagreement is, where do we start from and where do we end up? The Republicans want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I want to improve it. I want to build on it, get the cost down, get prescription drug costs down. Senator Sanders wants us to start all over again. This was a major achievement of President Obama, of our country. It is helping people right now. I am not going to wait and have this plunge back into a contentious national debate that has very little chance of succeeding. Okay. Let's make the Affordable Care Act work for everybody.
Plenty of politicians evolve on issues, but even some Democrats believe you change your positions based on political expediency. You were against same-sex marriage, now you're for it. You defended President Obama's immigration policies, now you say they're too harsh. You supported his trade deal dozens of times. You even called it the gold standard. Now, suddenly last week, you're against it. Will you say anything to get elected?
listen, Chuck, this is a good discussion here.
Yes,
and let me just say this, as Secretary Clinton may know, I am on the Health Education Labor Committee. That committee wrote the Affordable Care Act. The idea that I would dismantle health care in America while we're waiting to pass a Medicare for all is just not accurate. The Affordable Care Act has clearly, as Secretary Clinton made the point, done a lot of good things. But what it has not done is dealt with the fact that we have 29 million people today who have zero health insurance. We have even more who are underinsured with large deductibles and co-payments, and prescription drug prices are off the wall. So I do believe that in the future, not by dismantling what we have here, I helped write that bill, but by moving forward, rallying the American people, I do believe we should have health care for all.
All right, thank you both. Rachel.
Then there's Marco, the boy wonder. I'm not saying he will change his positions, but he will change his positions. The Secret Service's main job, if he's president, is to keep him hydrated.
You may not be aware of this, Donald, because you don't follow this stuff very closely, but here's what happened. When they passed Obamacare, they put a bailout fund in Obamacare. All these lobbyists who keep talking about, they put a bailout fund in the law that would allow public money to be used, taxpayer money, to bail out companies when they lost money. And we led the effort and wiped out that bailout fund. The insurance companies are not in favor of me. They hate that. They're suing now to get that bailout money put back in. Here's what you didn't hear in that answer, and this is important, guys. This is an important thing. What is your plan? I understand the lines around the state, whatever that means. This is not a game where you draw maps
and you
around.
Don't know what it
What
means.
is your plan?
That's the problem.
What is your plan on health care? You don't have a plan.
The biggest
Well, what
problem
is-
he
I'll
doesn't
give
know.
him 1 minute
The
at a
biggest
time to tell me
problem
his
he's
plan.
got is he
What's his
doesn't know.
plan?
You know, I watched him melt down 2 weeks ago with Chris Christie. I got to tell you, the biggest problem he's got is he really doesn't know about the lines. The biggest thing we've got, and the reason we have no competition, is because we have lines around the state, and you have
we
essentially
already mentioned that as part of my
monopolies in the
plan.
state.
I know what that is. But what else is part of your plan? So your only thing is to get rid of the lines around the states. What else is part of your health care plan?
What the lines around the states mean.
That's your only
and it
plan.
was almost done. No. You know
All
what
right,
that does?
I'll
That
give him
brings
time
in,
to mind. He can
excuse
tell
me,
us his plan.
Excuse me. That
What's your
brings
plan?
in competition. When you get rid of the lines, it brings in competition. So instead of having one insurance company taking care of New York or Texas, you'll have many. They'll compete, and it'll be a beautiful thing.
Right, and so that's the only part of the plan? Just the lines, the interstate competition?
The nice part about the plan, you'll have many different plans. You'll have competition. You'll have so many different plans.
But now he's repeating himself.
No, I'm not repeating. No. I don't repeat myself.
You don't repeat yourself.
Here's the guy who repeats himself. I don't
repeat yourself every day.
I watched him, talking about repeating, I watched him repeat himself 5 times 4 weeks ago. And
I saw you repeat yourself 5 times 5 seconds ago.
I watched him melt down on the stage like I've never seen anybody. I thought he came out of the swimming pool.
I said, well,
let's talk
I see him
about
repeat
your
himself
plan.
every night. It says 5 things. Everyone's dumb.
Senator
He's going to
Rubio.
make America great
Senator
again. We're going to
Rubio.
win.
Senator
He's
Rubio,
winning in the
please.
polls.
It's all true.
And the
Please
lines
stop.
around the state. Every night. Same thing.
Senator Rubio.
I tell the truth. I tell
Senator
the
Rubio,
truth.
you will have time to respond. If you
All
would
right.
just let Mr. Trump respond to what
Yeah,
you
he's
just
gonna give us
posed
his
to
plan
him.
now, right? Okay.
If you could talk a little bit more about your plan. I know you talked about
No,
the
we're going to have
interstate.
many different plans
you
because
give
there's going to be
us specific?
competition.
Said it again.
There's going to be competition. There is going to be competition among all of the states and the insurance companies. They're going to have many, many different plans.
Is there anything else you would like to add to that as part of
No,
your
there's
plan?
nothing to add. What's to add?
Secretary Clinton, Senator Sanders is campaigning against you now, at this point in the campaign, basically by arguing that you are not progressive enough to be the Democratic nominee. He has said that if you voted for the Iraq War, if you are in favor of the death penalty, if you wobbled on things like the Keystone Pipeline or TPP, if you said single-payer health care could never happen, then you're too far to the right of the Democratic Party to be the party's standard bearer. Given those policy positions, why should liberal Democrats support you and not Senator Sanders?
Well, because I am a progressive who gets things done, and the root of that word, progressive, is progress. But I've heard Senator Sanders' comments, and it's really caused me to wonder who's left in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Under his definition, President Obama is not progressive because he took donations from Wall Street. Vice President Biden is not progressive because he supported Keystone. Senator Shaheen is not progressive because she supports the trade pact. Even the late, great Senator Paul Wellstone would not fit this definition because he voted for DOMA. You know, we have differences, and honestly, I think we should be talking about what we want to do for the country. But if we're going to get into labels, I don't think it was particularly progressive to vote against the Brady Bill 5 times. I don't think it was progressive to vote to give gun makers and sellers immunity. I don't think it was progressive to vote against Ted Kennedy's immigration reform.
If he builds the wall the way he built Trump Towers, he'll be using illegal immigrant labor to do it. The second...
So cute. Such a cute soundbite. But here's a guy that buys a house for $179,000. He sells it to a lobbyist who's probably here for $380,000, and then legislation is passed. You tell me about this guy. This is what we're going to have as president.
Here's the guy that inherited $200 million. If he hadn't inherited $200 million, you know where Donald Trump would be right now? Selling watches in Manhattan.
I have to say, he lied this time. He lied. 100%. 100%.
You lied about the Polish workers.
Yeah.
You lied to the students of Trump
years ago.
University.
38 years ago.
Oh, he lied 38 years ago. All right, I guess there's a statute of limitation on lies.
The Donald. I am literally running out of adjectives. I don't know how I can best describe Donald Trump, but I can say this, that I don't think he understands what makes America great. And I know I'm supposed to be funny, but I'm not really happy about where the country is right now. I can make a million Donald Trump jokes, and I have, but our party and our country is going to have to up its game.
Senator Sanders, to that charge, how do you establish a list of what it means to be a progressive that is unrealistic?
No, not at all. Here's the reality of American economic life today. The reality is that we have one of the lowest voting turnouts of any major country on earth because so many people have given up on the political process. The reality is that there has been trillions of dollars of wealth going from the middle class in the last 30 years to the top 1/10 of 1%. The reality is that we have a corrupt campaign finance system which separates the American people's needs and desires from what Congress is doing. So to my mind, what we have got to do is wage a political revolution where millions of people who have given up on the political process stand up and fight back, demand a government that represents us and not just a handful of campaign contributors. Now, all of the ideas that I'm talking about, they are not radical ideas. Making public colleges and universities tuition-free, that exists in countries all over the world, used to exist in the United States. Rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure and creating 13 million jobs by doing away with tax loopholes that large corporations now enjoy by putting their money into the Cayman Islands and other tax havens, that is not a radical idea. What we need to do is to stand up to the big money interests and the campaign contributors. When we do that, we can, in fact, transform America.
Thank you, Senator.
If he builds the wall the way he built Trump Towers, he'll be using illegal immigrant labor to do it. The second...
So cute. Such a cute soundbite. But here's a guy that buys a house for $179,000. He sells it to a lobbyist who's probably here for $380,000, and then legislation is passed. You tell me about this guy. This is what we're going to have as president.
Here's the guy that inherited $200 million. If he hadn't inherited $200 million, you know where Donald Trump would be right now?
No.
Selling watches in Manhattan.
I have to say,
Senator
he lied
Cruz.
this time. He lied. 100%. 100%.
Senator
You lied about the Polish workers.
Yeah.
You lied to the
38
students of Trump
years ago.
University.
Let
38
Senator
years
Cruz
ago.
Oh,
jump
he
in,
lied
please.
38 years ago. All right, I guess there's a statute of limitation on lies.
I just want to follow up on a comment that Secretary Clinton said, Senator. You know, President Obama has not called for abolishing the death penalty. President Obama is for the big Asian trade deal known as TPP. And just yesterday you said you can't be both a moderate or a progressive, but you can't be both. Is President Obama, in your judgment, based on these policy positions, a progressive?
Let me just pick up on this point. This whole discussion began because I commented, not making an overall evaluation about the secretary. She was in Ohio, I think, in September or November. And she got up and said something like, I have been, I'm paraphrasing, I have been criticized because people think I'm a moderate. Well, I am a moderate. That's where this came from. It wasn't me paraphrasing her. It is what she said. And all that I said is nothing wrong with being a moderate. But you can't be a moderate. You can't be a progressive. In terms of President Obama, I think if we remember where this country was 7 years ago, 800,000 jobs being lost every month, $1.4 trillion deficit, the world's financial system on the verge of collapse. I think that President Obama, Vice President Biden, and the Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate have done a fantastic job. We are in much better shape today than we were 7 years ago, although my Republican colleagues seem to have forgotten where we were 7 years ago. That's the fact. But we still have a very long way to go. Do I think President Obama is a progressive? Yeah, I do. I disagree with him on a number of issues, including the trade agreement. But, yes, I think he has done an excellent job.
To the women who left the kitchen tonight to come, thank you all very much. John Kasich needs your help. He's the moderate with a good heart.
Well, Chuck, if I could, you know, in the very first debate, I was asked, am I a moderate or a progressive? And I said, I'm a progressive who likes to get things done. And cherry picking a quote here or there doesn't change my record of having fought for racial justice, having fought for kids' rights, having fought against the kind of inequities that fueled my interest in service in the first place, going back to my days in the Children's Defense Fund. It certainly didn't stop me from taking on the drug companies and the insurance companies before it was called Hillary Care. It was called, before it was called Obamacare, it was called Hillary Care because we took them on. And we weren't successful, but we kept fighting, and we got the Children's Health Insurance Program. And every step along the way, I have stood up and fought and have the scars to prove it. So, again, I think it's important that, look, I understand Senator Sanders is really trying to distinguish himself. I understand that. That's what you do in campaigns. But at the same time, let's not be, in I think, an unfair way, making an accusation or making an attack about where I stand and where I've always stood. And it is fair to say, Senator, that in your definition, as you being the self-proclaimed gatekeeper for progressivism, I don't know anyone else who fits that definition, but I know a lot of really hard-fighting progressives in the Democratic Party who have stood up time and time again against special interests, against the powerful, on behalf of those who are left behind and left out. And that's what we ought to be celebrating. Let's talk about what we would do as president and commander-in-chief to make sure the progress continues into the future.
30 seconds, then we'll move.
I was asked the hardest question in my political life. Do you agree with Donald Trump that Ted Cruz is the biggest liar in politics? Too close to call. I know exactly when Ted's going to drop out of the race. March 12th. That's Canadian Week at Myrtle Beach. When all of our Canadian friends get 10% off. But I will say that our Canadian is better than your Kenyan. Well, at least Canada's closer to America than Kenya. It's a step in the right direction.
You are all talk and no
Name
action.
one
What I've
specific thing you've
seen
done.
up here, I mean, first of all, this guy's a choke artist and this guy's a liar. You have a combination.
This guy always goes.
You have a combination of factors. He
This is
can't
so
do it for the
typical.
obvious reason, and he
But
can't do
here's
it
the
because
typical
he
thing he
doesn't know
does.
how to tell the truth.
What we're seeing with Donald is actually the pattern of Washington, the pattern of Washington deal makers, which is they make promises, they break their words, and then when anyone calls them on it, they call you a liar. And so that's Donald's pattern over and over again. And every time anyone points at Donald's actual record, what he said on national television,
Thank you,
Donald
Senator.
yells liar. Let me tell you something. Falsely accusing someone of lying is
ahead, Mr.
itself a
Trump.
lie, and it's something Donald does
Go
daily.
ahead, Mr. Trump.
I watched the lobbyists. I watched what this man did to Dr. Ben Carson, who I respect, in Iowa, where he said that Ben Carson is out of the race. He has left Iowa, and he's out of the race. And I thought it was disgraceful. And got a lot of votes because of that. A lot of votes took him away from Ben Carson. I watched that. Probably took him away from me, too. But I watched it. I also watched where he did a form that looked like it came right out of a government agency. And it said on top, voter violation. And then it graded you, and it scared the hell out of people. And it said the only way you clear up the violation, essentially, is to go and vote for Ted Cruz. I watched that fraudulent document, and I said it's the worst thing I've ever seen in politics. To me, that was even worse than what he did to Ben.
Senator Cruz.
I know
Donald,
politicians,
what you
I know
just-
politicians, believe it or not, better than you do, and it's not good.
That's right. I mean, instead of arguing about definitions, let's
Well,
talk
you
about
began it
let's talk
yesterday with
about
your
what we
comments.
should do. And one of the things we should do is not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. I am very proud to be the only candidate up here who does not have a super PAC, who is not raising huge sums of money from Wall Street or special interest. I am enormously proud. Never believed it would happen. That we have raised $3.5 million individual contributions, averaging $27 apiece. That is what the political revolution means.
Thank you.
Secretary Clinton,
You know, the person who first put out the idea of a 50-state party strategy is former Governor Howard Dean, who's with us tonight. And I'm very proud and grateful to have the support of so many elected Vermonters and former officials. Two former governors, the current governor, the current other senator. I really appreciate that. And I think it's because they've worked with me. They've seen what I do. They know what a kind of a colleague I am. They want me as their partner in the White House, and that's exactly what I will do. We'll get things done together. Democrats, Republicans, independents, we're going to make progress together when I'm president.
72 years ago, a woman could not be part of the American experience. If you don't vote, that's coming back in 2017.
I'm a negotiator. I've done very well over the years through negotiation. It's very important that we do that. In all fairness, Marco is not a negotiator. I watched him melt down, and I'll tell you, it was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. He's not going down.
He thinks the
Excuse me, wait
Palestinian is a
minute, wait
real
minute.
estate deal.
And these people may even be tougher than Chris Christie, okay?
The Palestinians
They may
are not
even
a
be
real
tougher.
estate deal,
Okay,
Donald.
no. A deal,
They're not a real estate
deal
deal.
is a deal. Let me tell you,
A
I've
deal
learned
is
a
not
long
a deal
time
when you're
ago.
dealing with terrorists. Have you
You
ever
are not a
negotiated with terrorists?
negotiator. You are not a negotiator. And with your thinking, you will never
agree.
bring peace. You will never bring peace.
Donald might be able to build
I wanna be
condos in the
able-
Palestinian areas,
Excuse me.
but he's not going to. This is
Excuse
not a
me,
real
I
estate
wanna
deal.
be able to bring
Senator.
peace. He will never be able to do it. I think I may be able to do it, although I will say this, probably the toughest deal of any kind is that particular deal.
Senator Sanders, to this point, Secretary Clinton is raising the issue of endorsements by your home state Democrats. She's implying that says something about the people who know you best.
Well, I don't see it quite like that.
How do you see it?
Will absolutely admit that Secretary Clinton has the support of far more governors, mayors, members of the House. She has the entire establishment, or almost the entire establishment, behind her. That's a fact. I don't deny it. But I am pretty proud that we have over 1 million people who have contributed to our campaign, averaging $27 a piece, that we have had meetings where 25,000, 30,000 people have come out, that our campaign is a campaign of the people, by the people, and for the people. So, Rachel, yes, Secretary Clinton does represent the establishment. I represent, I hope, ordinary Americans, and by the way, who are not all that enamored with the establishment, but I am very proud to have people like Keith Ellison and Raul Grijalva in the House, the co-chairman of the House Progressive Caucus.
30 seconds to respond to that.
What being part of the establishment is in the last quarter having a super PAC that raised $15 million from Wall Street, that throughout one's life raised a whole lot of money from the drug companies and other special interests. To my mind, if we do not get a handle on money in politics and the degree to which big money controls the political process in this country, nobody is going to bring about the changes that is needed in this country for the middle class and working families.
Yeah, but I think it's fair to really ask what's behind that comment. You know, Senator Sanders has said he wants to run a positive campaign. I've tried to keep my disagreements over issues, as it should be. But time and time again, by innuendo, by insinuation, there is this attack that he is putting forth, which really comes down to, you know, anybody who ever took donations or speaking fees from any interest group has to be bought. And I just absolutely reject that, Senator. And I really don't think these kinds of attacks by insinuation are worthy of you. And enough is enough. If you've got something to say, say it directly. But you will not find that I ever changed a view or a vote because of any donation that I ever received. And I have stood up and I have represented my constituents to the best of my ability, and I'm very proud of that.
You know,
so I think it's time to end the very artful smear that you and your campaign have been carrying out in recent weeks. And let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about the issues that divide us.
Okay, let's talk
we
about
both
issues.
agree with campaign finance reform.
Let's talk about issues.
I worked hard for McCain-Feingold. I want to reverse Citizens United.
Let's talk about issues.
But I also think that if you're going to claim that you're the only one that lifted this into the campaign, that you acknowledge that, for example, you're the only person on the stage that's ever been fined for hiring people to work on your projects illegally. You hired some workers from Poland.
I'm the only one on the stage that's hired people. You haven't hired anybody.
Well, in fact, some of the people he
by the way,
well, but hold on.
I've hired tens of thousands of people over my job. You've hired
1,000 people
You've
from
had
another
nothing
company,
but problems
from another
with your
country.
credit cards, etc.
Let me
So
say.
don't
Let
tell
me just
me
say.
about
Well,
that.
let me finish the
Senator,
statement.
hold
This is
on.
important.
You haven't hired one
He
person
hired
in your life.
workers from Poland, and he had to pay $1 million or so in a judgment
wrong.
for hiring.
That's
It is,
wrong.
That's a fact.
Totally wrong.
Well, people can look it up. I'm sure people are Googling it right
I've
now. Look it
hired
up.
Senator Cruz.
Trump
Excuse
Polish
me.
workers. You'll see $1 million
Excuse me.
for hiring
Excuse me.
illegal workers on one of his
Excuse me,
projects.
yeah.
Yeah, he did.
Well, you know, it's interesting.
That happened.
I've hired tens of thousands of people over my lifetime. Tens of
Many
thousands.
from other
Be-
countries
be
instead of
quiet,
hiring
just
Americans.
Be quiet. Let me talk. I've hired tens of thousands of people. He brings up something from 30 years ago. It worked out very well. Everybody was
Yeah, you paid
happy.
$1 million.
And by the way, the laws were totally different.
right.
That was a whole different
Well,
world.
Thank you.
right.
But I've hired people. Nobody up here has hired
Senator
anybody.
Cruz.
The nice guy is Ben Carson. He tried to kill his cousin and hit his mother in the head with a hammer. He's the one we all like. How did I lose to these guys?
Let's talk about issues.
Let's talk about issues. All right, let's talk about why in the 1990s Wall Street got deregulated. Did it have anything to do with the fact that Wall Street spent billions of dollars on lobbying and campaign contributions? Well, some people might think, yeah, that had some influence. Let's ask why it is that we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and your medicine can be doubled tomorrow, and there's nothing that the government can do to stop it. You think it has anything to do with the huge amounts of campaign contributions and lobbying from the fossil fuel industry? Let's talk about climate change. Do you think there is a reason why not one Republican has the guts to recognize that climate change is real and that we need to transform our energy system? Do you think it has anything to do with the Koch brothers and ExxonMobil pouring huge amounts of money into the political system? That is what goes on in America. There is a reason why these people are putting huge amounts of money into our political system. And in my view, it is undermining American democracy, and it is allowing Congress to represent wealthy campaign contributors and not the working families of this country.
And it's addressed to you, and it's about this issue of the speeches, particularly to Goldman Sachs. This is what the questioner wrote. Verbatim. I am concerned with the abuses of Wall Street has taken with the American taxpayers' money. And then she asked whether you would release the transcripts of your Goldman Sachs speeches, and then added, don't you think the voting public has a right to know what was said? But let's make that bigger. Are you willing to release the transcripts of all your paid speeches? We do know through reporting that there were transcription services for all of those paid speeches. In full disclosure, would you release all of them?
Well, look how far you've come. The most dishonest person in America is a woman. Who's about to be president. How could that be? My party is going batshit crazy.
I was the first one to file a financial disclosure form, almost 100 pages. You don't learn anything about somebody's wealth with a tax return. You learn it from statements. I filed, which shows that I'm worth over $10 billion. I built a great company with very little debt. People were shocked. The people in the back, the reporters, they were shocked when they went down. As far as my return, I want to file it, except for many years, I've been audited every year. 12 years or something like that. Every year, they audit me, audit me, audit me. Nobody gets audited. I have friends that are very wealthy people. They never get audited. I get audited every year. I will absolutely give my return, but I'm being audited now for 2 or 3 years, so I can't do it until the audit is finished, obviously, and I think people would understand that.
I will look into it. I don't know the status, but I will certainly look into it. But I can only repeat what is the fact, that I spoke to a lot of different groups with a lot of different constituents, a lot of different kinds of members about issues that had to do with world affairs. I probably described more times than I can remember how stressful it was advising the president about going after bin Laden. So my view on this is, look at my record. Look at what I am proposing. And we have a vigorous agreement here. We both want to rein in the excesses of Wall Street.
If we don't win this election, when are we ever going to win one? That's not meant to be funny. A good Republican would defend Ted Cruz after tonight. That ain't happening. If you killed Ted Cruz on the floor of the Senate, and the trial was in the Senate, nobody could convict you.
I'm beating him awfully badly in the polls.
But you're not beating Hillary.
So
but you're not beating Hillary.
Well, then if I can't beat her, you're really going to get killed, aren't you? So let me ask you this, because you're really getting beaten badly. I know you're embarrassed. I know you're embarrassed. But keep fighting. Keep swinging, man. Swing for the fences. Let me just tell you. The Trump University case is a civil case, not a It's a civil case. It's a case where people want to try and get. It's a case that is nonsense. It's something I could have settled many times. I could settle it right now for very little money, but I don't want to do it out of principle. The people that took the course all signed, many, signed report cards saying it was fantastic, it was wonderful, it was beautiful. And believe me, I'll win that case. That's an easy case.
In my view, the business model of Wall Street is fraud. Is fraud. I believe that corruption is rampant, and the fact that major bank after major bank has reached multi-billion-dollar settlements with the United States government when we have a weak regulatory system tells me that not only did we have to bail them out once, if we don't start breaking them up, we're going to have to bail them out again, and I do not want to see that happen.